Working at a gas station might not seem like anyone's dream job, but for me, it was a chance to earn money and study at the same time. My name is Cooper, and this is the story of how I started working at Milton's gas and convenience store, a place that turned out to be much stranger than I expected. 3 years ago, I was looking for a job to pay for my first semester of classes at the local community college. Driving around town, I spotted a help wanted sign in the window of a rundown old gas station. The sign read, Milton's Gas and Convenience Store, and it was located a few miles outside town, near the edge of a small national forest. Despite living in the area for only 2 weeks, I had never noticed the place before. Curious, I walked into the gas station where I found the owner, Milton Jackson, behind the counter. He was watching a rerun of Supernatural on a small TV. When I entered, the bell above the door jangled and Milton looked up. "You here for the job?" he asked slowly, eyeing me up and down. Yes," I mumbled nervously. "How did you know?" "Tic Tac told me you were coming," Milton replied casually. Confused, I glanced around until Milton pointed towards the front of the store. Perched on top of the rusty metal sign that read, Milton's Gas and Convenience Store, was a huge black and white crow. I named her Tic Tac because she likes Tic Tacs, popcorn, and gummy bears. But I wouldn't name her Gummy Bears, because that's not dignified, Milton explained. Feeling a bit bewildered, I nodded and listened as Milton offered me the job. He needed someone to work nights, from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., with Sundays off. The pay was $20 an hour, and it would just be the two of us working there. Despite the oddness of the situation and the appearance of the gas station, which seemed to get few customers, the thought of making $20 an hour convinced me to accept the job without hesitation. Sure. Here's the next part of your story, paraphrased in simple English. The next evening, I arrived for work a little before 6 p.m. Milton gave me a rundown of my duties, keeping the shelves and counters clean and stocked, operating the register, and he even entrusted me with his home phone number and a key to lock up in case of an emergency. He showed me around, mentioning that I could help myself to snacks and use an electric hot plate in the office if I wanted to heat up some soup. Then he pulled out a red notebook from under the cash register. On the cover, it said, "Always keep watch," in bold black letters. "This here," Milton explained, "is what you really need to pay attention to. Read it when I leave. You might find it hard to believe at first, but eventually you'll understand. Just do your best, and Tic Tac will let you know if there's trouble." I started to ask what kind of trouble to expect, but Milton just shook his head, pointed to the notebook, and said he was off to cook dinner. He left at 6 p.m. sharp, driving away slowly in his old truck. Standing by the front door, I looked up at Tic Tac the crow and muttered, "Well, it's just you and me tonight." First, I made sure the store was empty by checking the bathroom, storage room, and the small office. Satisfied, I grabbed a can of Coke from the fridge, settled onto the stool behind the counter, and opened the red notebook. Inside, in neat handwriting, were several pages of instructions. They said not to change anything in the book and to add new information at the back. Customers were to be directed to Hadley Preserve if they asked about campsites, and I was to discourage them from staying in our campsites, especially if they wore red clothing. Wearing red was a big no-no, as it attracted something called the Watcher. I read on, realizing that it was best to avoid wearing red while working there and to avoid having a red car parked out front. Putting down my Coke, I stepped outside onto the porch, the old boards creaking under my weight. Tic Tac, the crow, gave me a curious look with his one eye as I stepped outside. There were no cars passing by on the road. To my left, the road stretched across flat land and scrub, leading back to town. About 500 feet to my right, the road began to climb into the hills and disappeared into dense forest. It was decision time. Should I stay or should I go? Giving up $20 an hour for an easy job seemed like a lot. Was the old guy, Milton, crazy? I wasn't sure, but he didn't seem dangerous. I decided to give it a shot for 2 weeks and see how things went. I had agreed to the job, and I was determined to make the best of it. Returning inside and taking my place behind the counter, I continued reading the red notebook. Tic-Tac, the crow, would warn me when something was approaching. She was never wrong. Whenever I heard her call, I could expect visitors soon. Every morning, at dawn, I had to retrieve the stepladder from the storage room and fill Tic-Tac's silver cup with fresh popcorn and green Tic-Tacs. That was her payment for guarding the road. If I ever saw a black and gray German shepherd named Old Sarge in the road, I should listen to him because he was there to help when things went wrong. I had to stir the cheese for the nachos every 30 minutes to prevent it from hardening. If I saw green thunder in an approaching storm, I had to set up flashing hazard lights and a road closed sign from the storage room and close the road into the park. If the sky over the mountains turned deep purple, it was a code purple. I had to load emergency supplies into the tow truck parked out back, close the road, and evacuate all hikers and campers. I also needed to search all 7 campsites for parked cars. Milton's voice echoed in my head, urgent and panicked. Get the campers and hikers out immediately. Say whatever you have to. Just get every person out of the park. I made a mental note to keep the coffee pot full, ensuring it never went below halfway, as instructed. That marked the end of the strange instructions. The remaining pages were filled with scribbled notes. I skimmed through them until I reached a paragraph titled Possible Weapons in a Code Purple. It mentioned something about beings being affected by bright light, but it needed further testing. Closing the notebook, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The Watcher, Green Thunder, the color red, and code purple. It all seemed ridiculous, and I was starting to feel spooked. As the sun set and darkness crept in beyond the bright lights of the gas pumps, a loud triple caw from Tic-Tac nearly startled me. She hopped twice on her perch, stared at me intensely, and then flew off into the night. I was alone, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. 15 minutes later, a hatchback pulled up to the pumps, piled high with camping gear. A woman got out, swiped her card, and started filling the tank. She seemed ordinary enough, tall and thin with long brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, dressed for hiking in jeans and heavy boots. But as she approached the door, my heart sank. Her jacket was bright red. As she browsed the snack section, my mind raced through possible scenarios. Should I tell her she's the 1,000th customer and offer to trade her jacket? No, that wouldn't work. Maybe I should jokingly pretend to rob her for her jacket. No, too risky and absurd. Ultimately, I decided to stick to my commitment to do the job to the best of my ability. She placed her items on the counter, and as I rang her up, I asked where she was headed. She replied with a smile, mentioning Red Rock Canyon, and then asked about Hadley Preserve. I told her it was about 45 minutes up the road and suggested it as an alternative camping spot. The woman considered my suggestion about Hadley Preserve but decided against it, explaining she'd been driving for hours and just wanted to set up camp, eat dinner, and rest. I awkwardly joked about mosquitoes being attracted to red, and she left, seemingly unbothered. The rest of the night passed quietly. In the morning, I followed Milton's instructions, making popcorn and filling Tic-Tac's cup above the door, though I didn't see the crow. Milton arrived promptly at 6 a.m., acknowledging my lone customer with a nod. The following 2 nights were quiet, with only 1 customer each time, neither wearing red. I settled into the routine, making easy money and passing the time reading or watching YouTube on my phone until Tic-Tac's warning calls at 5 a.m. 20 minutes later, a police car pulled in, and Officer Jim Langston entered the store. He showed me a picture of a missing woman, my first customer. I shared what I knew except for the mosquito story. Afterward, Officer Langston asked me to put up the photo on the bulletin board with others of missing people. As the sun rose, I stepped onto the porch and noticed the bulletin board for the first time, filled with notices, many about missing people wearing red. This made me take the strange occurrences more seriously. Following the police visit, I became more diligent at work, studying park maps and keeping records of visitors. I even convinced Milton to help with the documentation. Despite my efforts, Milton remained cryptic about the Watcher and Code Purple. 2 weeks later, a couple with a young boy stopped for gas, their red tent catching my attention. I told them about a promotion at the store. As the days passed, I got creative with attracting customers. Offering deals like trading old camping gear for new ones became my thing. One time, while a guy was busy in the restroom, I swiftly swapped his red sleeping bag with a top-of-the-line green one. He never even suspected a thing. One evening, a mom and her little girl stopped by. The girl, Bella, wore a purple shirt with her name written in sparkles and vibrant red tennis shoes. When I found out they were heading to Red Rock Canyon, where a woman had gone missing, panic set in. I tried every trick in the book to persuade them to go elsewhere, even concocting stories about glitter craft parties at Hadley Preserve. But nothing worked until Tic Tac, the crow, came to the rescue. Her timely gift on Bella's shoe hurried them off. Despite these incidents, I felt like I had things under control until that fateful night when everything spiraled out of control. When I arrived for my shift at 6 a.m., the gas station was deserted. Milton was nowhere to be found, and even though his truck was parked outside, there was no sign of him. I tried calling his home phone, but there was no answer. Suddenly, I heard a dog barking outside. Stepping out, I spotted a large black and gray German Shepherd in the middle of the road. It must have been Old Sarge from the notebook. Remembering the instructions, I knew I had to listen to him. Then, Tic Tac flew past me and I followed her gaze towards the park. My heart sank when I saw the sky above it. It was a deep, ominous purple, slowly swirling like a forming tornado. In a panic, I raced back into the store, grabbed the keys to the tow truck, and loaded it with emergency supplies. Following Old Sarge's lead, I sped towards the park. Old Sarge led me to a clearing where I found a family sitting around a campfire, a dad, his teenage daughter, and a little boy named Timmy. Old Sarge was barking frantically, trying to alert them to the danger, but they seemed oblivious. The dad was roasting marshmallows while the little boy, Timmy, seemed to notice Old Sarge. He clung to his dad, a look of fear in his eyes. They seemed startled when they saw me emerging from the woods, breathless. "You've got to go. Didn't you see the tornado coming?" I managed to say. The dad glanced up at the darkening purple sky, finally realizing the danger. "We didn't hear any storm warnings when we arrived today," he said. "It came up suddenly. Emergency personnel are on the way, but you need to go now," I urged. "Leave everything behind. Take only what you can load in 5 minutes. I have to go warn other campers." The dad nodded, and they quickly doused the fire and started packing up. Old Sarge seemed satisfied and trotted back toward the main road. Back at the tow truck, Old Sarge was waiting. I started the truck and followed him. He bypassed several campsites, indicating they were empty. But when we reached campsite 5, he darted past a green Toyota and into the woods. I followed, the wind picking up as I chased after the barking dog. Bursting through the trees, I found myself at the top of a hill overlooking a river. Down below, a large tent was set up, and 2 adults sat by the river, seemingly unaware of the danger. The little girl emerged from the tent wearing a red sweater, chasing a red ball against the wind. My heart sank when I saw a man in black with a red banded top hat, seemingly controlling the ball. This was the Watcher. I knew I wouldn't make it in time. But then, old Sarge intervened, growling and blocking the girl's path. He led her back to safety, and I raced down the hill. By the time I reached the river, I warned the parents about the tornado, and they quickly packed up and headed to their car. With only one campsite left, I followed old Sarge to campsite 7, known as Red Rock Canyon. Instead of chasing through the woods this time, I took a maintenance road. Racing along, I suddenly had to brake hard. There was a hiker standing in the road, frozen with fear, desperately needing help. As my hand reached for the door handle, my eyes caught sight of something colossal moving stealthily through the trees just 10 feet behind the paralyzed hiker. It was an imposing figure, easily towering over 20 feet tall, its form obscured by a hazy outline akin to peering through rippling water. Despite its massive size, its features were indistinct, but its presence was undeniably menacing. Its sudden movement and looming presence sent shivers down my spine. The creature's head snapped sharply towards the frozen hiker, as if drawn by his fear. Whether it was his fear it sensed or something else entirely, I couldn't tell. The creature with its enormous frame closed the distance in a matter of seconds, towering over the hiker, who remained rooted in terror. Fearing for the hiker's safety, I scrambled to recall the notebook's mention of using light as a deterrent. With trembling hands, I flicked on the bright lights mounted atop the tow truck, praying fervently that they would serve their purpose. The sudden burst of light seemed to startle the creature, causing it to emit a piercing screech and stumble backward, momentarily disoriented. But just as relief washed over me, old Sarge, the faithful dog, charged out of the woods, growling fiercely, drawing the creature's attention away from us. It was a tense moment as the dog bravely stood his ground, barking defiantly at the looming threat. Their confrontation was brief but intense, culminating in the creature's retreat into the depths of the forest, disappearing from sight. With the immediate danger averted, I wasted no time in ushering the bewildered hiker, later identified as Samuel, into the safety of the tow truck. As we sped back to the gas station, the events of the night replayed in my mind, each detail etched vividly in my memory. Upon our return, Samuel's demeanor remained shaken, but his gratitude was evident as he recounted the harrowing encounter. Despite the relief of our safe return, questions lingered in the air, unanswered and unsettling. Later, I received news of Milton's health scare, a heart attack that had left him incapacitated but on the path to recovery. The realization of his vulnerability struck a chord within me, reinforcing my resolve to stay and continue his work, uncertain as it may be. In the aftermath of the night's events, I found myself grappling with a newfound sense of purpose, a commitment to remain vigilant in the face of the unknown. Despite the uncertainties and dangers that lurked in the shadows, there was an undeniable allure to the enigmatic gas station, a sense of belonging that transcended logic or reason. As dawn broke, casting its golden hues over the quiet landscape, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. My name is Cooper, and amidst the strange occurrences and inexplicable mysteries, this gas station had become more than just a workplace. It was a sanctuary, a place where the extraordinary became ordinary, and where I too found my place in the unfolding saga of the unknown.